I was standing in the marble foyer of my mother-in-law's estate when I overheard the ultimatum that would change everything. The words drifted down from the second-floor landing, crisp and cold as the January air outside. Get rid of that woman or you'll never see a penny of this family's money. Not one penny, Castellan. Do you understand me? My husband's voice came next, strained and trembling in a way I had never heard before. Mother, please. You can't ask me to choose. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. This family has standards. We have a legacy to protect, and that legacy does not include her. That woman. Her. Not my name. Not Amara, the name my grandmother had given me, meaning eternal, imperishable. Just pronouns, as if speaking my actual name might contaminate her mouth. I stood frozen in the entryway, my coat still buttoned, my purse clutched against my chest like armor. We had driven 3 hours through a snowstorm to attend what was supposed to be a family dinner, a chance for me to finally be welcomed into the fold after 2 years of marriage. Instead, I was hearing my existence reduced to a problem to be solved, a stain to be removed, a choice my husband had to make between love and money. The house around me was everything I would never be in her eyes. Old money, old blood, old power. The chandelier above my head was Venetian crystal, imported in 1890 according to the plaque on the wall. The paintings lining the hallway were originals, European masters whose names I recognized from art history classes. The furniture was antique, each piece worth more than most people's cars. This was the world Castellan had been born into, the world he was supposed to inherit, the world his mother was now holding hostage to force him to choose. My name is Amara Whitfield, though I was born Amara Baptiste. I am a 34-year-old black woman, a grant writer for a nonprofit that builds affordable housing, a daughter of immigrants who came to this country with nothing but hope and determination. My parents cleaned houses and drove taxis to put me through college. I paid my own way through graduate school working 3 jobs. I built my life from scratch, from sweat and sacrifice, and refusal to accept limitations. And I had fallen in love with a white man whose mother believed that my very existence was a threat to everything her family stood for. Castellan and I met at a conference 3 years ago. I was there representing my organization. He was there representing his family's charitable foundation, the vehicle through which the Whitfield fortune maintained its tax-exempt status while projecting an image of benevolence. We were on the same panel about sustainable community development, and he said something that surprised me. He acknowledged that generational wealth was built on exploitation, that philanthropy was often just guilt money trying to buy absolution. It was honest in a way I hadn't expected from someone wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. We talked for hours after the panel. Then we talked over dinner. Then we talked through the night in the hotel bar until they kicked us out at 2 in the morning. He was smart, thoughtful, willing to question the privilege he had been born into. And he looked at me like I was the most fascinating person he had ever met. Not despite my background, but because of it. Because I had stories he could never have, experiences that his wealth had insulated him from. I fell slowly, carefully, knowing the complications that would come. Interracial relationships are always complicated, but when you add wealth disparity to the mix, when you add family expectations and inheritance, and the weight of generations, the complications multiply exponentially. I knew his family would disapprove. What I hadn't realized was the depth of that disapproval, the viciousness with which it would eventually be expressed. His mother, Sophronia Whitfield, had been polite at first, cold, but polite. She had met me exactly 3 times before the wedding, each encounter carefully controlled and limited. Lunch at an expensive restaurant where she could display her magnanimity by being seen with me in public. Tea at her country club where she could demonstrate that she wasn't prejudiced, she simply had standards. A brief visit to the family estate where she could make it clear that this world would never really belong to me no matter what legal documents said otherwise. At the wedding, she wore black. She sat in the front row, with her lips pressed into a line so thin they nearly disappeared. She didn't cry, she didn't smile, she didn't speak to my parents beyond the bare minimum required by etiquette. When it came time for family photos, she positioned herself as far from me as possible while still technically being in the frame. The message was clear. This marriage might be legal, but she would never recognize it as legitimate. For 2 years, Castellan had tried to bridge the gap. He invited her to dinner she didn't attend. He called her weekly, enduring her passive-aggressive comments about his choices. He sent gifts for her birthday and holidays, gifts that were probably donated to charity without ever being opened. He believed, with the optimism of someone who had never been truly rejected by family, that eventually she would come around. That love would triumph over prejudice. That time would soften her resistance. I had known better. I had seen the way she looked at me, the way her eyes would sweep over my body like I was something unclean. I had heard the subtle comments about my hair, my clothes, my speech patterns, my profession. Everything about me was wrong in ways that were never quite explicitly stated, but were always clearly implied. I was too much and not enough simultaneously. Too black, too poor, too self-made, too outside the boundaries of what she considered acceptable for her son. But I had married him anyway, because I loved him, because he loved me, because we believed that our love was strong enough to withstand the pressure. We had built a life together in the city, far from his family's estate, far from his mother's judgment. We had our own apartment, modest by his standards, luxurious by mine. We had our work, our friends, our private world, where we could be just two people who loved each other without the weight of history and prejudice crushing down on us. Until now, until this moment in this marble foyer, listening to his mother give him an ultimatum that made our private world suddenly very fragile. I heard footsteps on the stairs. My husband appeared first, his face pale and drawn. He was 36, tall and lean, with the kind of effortless elegance that came from generations of good nutrition and expensive education. His light brown hair was disheveled, like he had been running his hands through it. His blue eyes, usually so calm and confident, were wild with panic and grief. Behind him came Sophronia. She was 62 but looked 50, maintained by the kind of health care and beauty treatments that money could buy. Her silver hair was perfectly styled. Her cream-colored suit was impeccable. Her pearls were real, probably worth more than my car. She descended the stairs like a queen approaching peasants, her posture perfect, her expression serene. She looked at me with those cold gray eyes and smiled, a smile that never reached above her mouth. "Amara, I didn't realize you had arrived." The lie was so blatant it was almost funny. My car was parked in the circular driveway. The housekeeper had let me in. She had to have heard the door, had to have known I was standing there. But this was the game she played, pretending ignorance, maintaining deniability. "I arrived about 10 minutes ago," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Long enough to hear your conversation with your son?" Her smile didn't falter. "Then you understand the situation. I understand that you've given your son an ultimatum, me or his inheritance. I prefer to think of it as clarifying his priorities. Castellan has always been idealistic, sometimes to his own detriment. I'm simply helping him understand what's at stake." Castellan moved to my side, reaching for my hand. His palm was clammy with sweat. "Mother, this is insane. You can't make me choose between my wife and my family." "I'm not making you choose between your wife and your family. I'm making you choose between a mistake and your responsibilities. There's a difference." I felt Castellan flinch beside me. The word mistake landed like a slap, sharp and stinging. She had called our marriage a mistake. 2 years of building a life together, reduced to an error in judgment that needed correcting. "I'm not a mistake," I said quietly. "I'm his wife. A wife he chose in defiance of everything this family stands for. A wife who brings nothing to this union except her own self-interest." "Mother, that's enough." Castellan's voice was rising, anger finally breaking through the shock. "No, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. Do you have any idea what people say? What they think when they see you two together? They think you're having some kind of crisis. They think she trapped you. They think you're throwing your life away on some misguided social justice crusade. I don't care what they think." "Well, you should care. You should care about this family's reputation. You should care about the foundation, about the businesses, about the legacy your grandfather and great-grandfather built. You should care that you're the last male heir in the Whitfield line, and the choices you make will determine whether everything we've built survives or crumbles." I felt the words like stones being thrown at me. Last male heir, Legacy, survival. This wasn't just about race, though race was certainly the most visible part of it. This was about bloodlines and dynasty, and the terror wealthy families have of dilution, of their carefully accumulated power being dispersed to people they consider unworthy. The legacy will survive, Castellan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Not if you continue down this path. The foundation is worth $40 million. The family business interests are worth another $200 million. The estate, the properties, the investments, all of it adds up to a fortune that has been carefully stewarded for 4 generations. And you want to hand it over to her? I'm not handing anything over to anyone. Amara has her own career. She doesn't want your money. Sophronia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Of course she doesn't want it. Not yet. Not while she's playing the role of the independent woman. But what happens when you have children? What happens when she realizes that divorcing you would mean she gets half of everything? What happens when she decides that being a Whitfield is more valuable than whatever little career she's carved out for herself? I had been silent through most of this, trying to maintain some shred of dignity, but that pushed me over the edge. I would never do that. I love your son. I loved him when I had no idea how much money your family had. I would love him if he was broke. How convenient that you'll never have to prove that. I can prove it right now. I'll sign a post-nuptial agreement renouncing any claim to the Whitfield fortune, every penny of it. I don't want your money. I never have. Sophronia's eyes narrowed. And what about children? What about their claim? If we have children, they can make their own choices about their relationship with your fortune. But I won't be the reason Castellan loses his inheritance. How noble. And yet here you are, standing in my home, wearing my son's ring, embedded in my family, whether I want you here or not. I'm here because your son invited me, because he wanted his family to accept his wife, because he still believes, despite all evidence to the contrary, that you're capable of basic human decency. The slap was so fast I didn't see it coming. Sophronia's hand connected with my cheek with a crack that echoed through the marble foyer. My head snapped to the side, my eyes watering from the sting and the shock. For a moment, the 3 of us stood frozen in a terrible tableau. Then Castellan exploded. What the hell is wrong with you? He stepped between me and his mother, his body shaking with rage. You hit her. You actually hit her. Sophronia's hand was still raised, trembling slightly. Her face had gone from serene to twisted with something ugly and raw. She disrespected me in my own home. She told you the truth. She offered to sign away any financial claim. She's done nothing but try to make peace with you, and you hit her. I will not be spoken to that way by someone like her. Someone like her? You mean my wife? You mean the woman I love? Or do you mean a black woman who dared to marry into your precious white family? The words hung in the air, finally spoken explicitly, after 2 years of dancing around them. Sophronia's face went pale, then red. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you? You've made it clear from the beginning that her race is the real issue here. All this talk about legacy and reputation and standards, it's just code. You can't stand that I married a black woman. You can't stand that your grandchildren, if we have them, will be biracial. You can't stand that the Whitfield bloodline is going to be a little darker than you planned. That's not true. Then why did you have no problem with Jennifer? Why was she acceptable when Amara isn't? Jennifer had been his previous girlfriend, a woman from a similarly wealthy family who Sophronia had adored. Jennifer was white, blonde, from old Boston money. Jennifer had checked every box on Sophronia's list of acceptable daughter-in-law qualities. The relationship had ended because Jennifer wanted someone who would join her family's business empire, and Castellan wanted to do something meaningful with his life. But Sophronia had never forgiven him for letting her go. Jennifer was appropriate. Jennifer was white. Jennifer was from a family we knew, a family with values aligned with ours, a family with a history we could verify. And there it is. The real reason. You don't know Amara's family. You don't know where they came from or who their people were. And because they're black immigrants from Haiti, you assume they must be inferior. You assume they must be trying to take something from you. Sophronia was shaking now, her composure finally cracking. This family has worked for 200 years to build what we have. 200 years of careful planning and strategic marriages and preservation of wealth, and you want to throw it all away for her. I want to build a life with the woman I love. If that means walking away from your money, then so be it. I grabbed his arm. My cheek was still burning from the slap, but my mind was clear and cold. Wait, don't make that decision right now. Not like this. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. Amara, I don't care about the money. I know you don't, but you need to think about what walking away really means. The foundation does good work. Real good work. Housing projects, education programs, medical clinics. If you walk away, all of that gets controlled by her, and we both know she'll gut anything that actually helps people in favor of galas and photo opportunities. Sophronia's laugh was bitter. At least she understands how the game is played. This isn't a game, I said, my voice hard. This is people's lives, communities that depend on the funding your foundation provides, and you're willing to use that as a weapon to get what you want. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to protect my family. I am your family, Castellan said, or at least I was. But if you make me choose, if you really force this ultimatum, then you need to understand something. I choose her. Every time I choose her. And whatever relationship we had before this moment, it's over. I saw something flicker in Sophronia's eyes then. Fear, maybe. Or the realization that she had pushed too far, that her strategy of intimidation had backfired. But she rallied quickly, her face hardening again. Then you're making a choice you'll regret for the rest of your life. The only thing I regret is not standing up to you sooner. He took my hand, and we walked toward the door. My legs felt shaky, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. We were really doing this. We were really walking away from a fortune, from his family, from everything he had ever known. As we reached the door, Sophronia called out one last time. You have until the end of the month. 1 month to come to your senses. After that, I'm changing my will. Everything will go to charity. You'll inherit nothing. Castellan didn't turn around. Good. At least then the money might actually do some good. We walked out into the snow, which was falling harder now, thick and heavy. The drive back to the city was silent. I pressed a tissue to my burning cheek and watched the landscape blur past. Castellan's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight I worried his teeth might crack. It wasn't until we were home, standing in our small apartment that suddenly felt like a sanctuary, that he finally broke down. He collapsed onto the couch and put his face in his hands. The sobs that came were deep and wrenching, the sound of something fundamental breaking inside him. I sat beside him and pulled him into my arms. He clung to me like a drowning man, and I held him while he cried for the mother he thought he had, for the family he had believed existed, for the inheritance that wasn't just money but a connection to generations of history. I'm sorry, he gasped between sobs. I'm so sorry she hit you. I'm sorry I brought you into this. You didn't bring me into anything. I chose this. I chose you. But now you're losing everything too. The security, the opportunities. I never had those things to lose. But you're giving up your whole family. He pulled back, his eyes red and swollen. She gave me an ultimatum. You or the money. That's not a choice. That's an insult. She's insulting both of us by even suggesting I would choose money over you. But the foundation, the good it could do. We'll find other ways to do good, together, without her blood money and her conditions and her poison. I kissed his forehead, tasting salt from his tears. Okay, then we fight, but we fight smart. We don't just walk away and let her win by default. What do you mean? I mean we have 1 month before she changes her will, so we use that month. We gather information. We understand exactly what's in the estate, what's in the foundation, what the legal structure is. We find out if there are other family members who might support us. We build a case. A case for what? For fighting back, for not letting her use money as a weapon, for making sure that if we walk away, we do it on our terms, not hers. He looked at me with something like awe. You want to go to war with my mother. I want to make sure that whatever happens, she doesn't get to just steamroll over us. She thinks we'll fold because we need the money. Let's show her exactly how wrong she is. Over the next few days, we began to strategize. Castellan had access to some of the family financial records through his role on the foundation board. We started digging through them, understanding the structure of the Whitfield fortune. What we found was complicated and revealing. The bulk of the wealth was held in a series of trusts established by Castellan's grandfather. These trusts had specific rules about distribution and succession. Sophronia was the primary trustee, but she wasn't the only one. There was also a corporate trustee, a bank that had managed Whitfield family finances for 3 generations. And there were conditions in the trust documents, requirements that Sophronia couldn't simply ignore. One of those requirements was that any changes to beneficiary status had to be approved by a majority of the Trust Advisory Committee, which included not just Sophronia, but also 2 family friends and the corporate trustee. She couldn't unilaterally cut Castellan out of the inheritance. She could make his life hell, but she couldn't completely disinherit him without the approval of others. We also discovered that Castellan had his own trust, established when he was born, that his mother couldn't touch. It wasn't as large as the main family fortune, only about $5 million, but it was his, outright, controlled by no one but him. Sophronia had been holding the threat of the larger inheritance over his head while pretending that he would be left with nothing. It was manipulation, pure and simple. Armed with this information, I suggested we consult a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but someone who specialized in trust and estate law, someone who could help us understand our options. Castellan was resistant at first, feeling like hiring a lawyer was an admission that the family relationship was truly broken beyond repair. But eventually, he agreed. The lawyer we found was a woman named Thessaly Wren. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued, with a reputation for taking on old money families and winning. When we met her in her office overlooking the city, she listened to our story without interrupting, taking occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. When we finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "Let me make sure I understand. Your mother-in-law has threatened to disinherit you if you don't divorce your wife. But the bulk of the inheritance is held in trusts with specific succession requirements, and you also have your own separate trust that she can't touch." "That's right," Castellan said, "and she slapped your wife in front of you." Thessaly's smile was cold and sharp. "Then she's handed us several avenues of attack." "Attack?" I asked. "She's attempting to use her position as trustee to coerce behavior that violates public policy. Conditioning an inheritance on divorcing a spouse, particularly when race is clearly a motivating factor, creates potential legal exposure. We could argue she's violating her fiduciary duty as trustee by letting personal prejudice influence her decisions about trust management." "You think we could sue her?" Castellan sounded shocked. "I think we could make her life very complicated if she follows through on her threats. The assault creates another issue entirely. She physically attacked your wife. That's not just morally reprehensible, it's criminal." "I'm not pressing charges," I said quickly. "Why not?" "Because it won't help anything. It'll just make this more ugly in public." Thessaly studied me. "You're trying to protect her, even after what she did." "I'm trying to protect my husband. He's already losing his mother. I don't need to be responsible for her going to jail too." Noble, possibly too noble, but I respect it. She turned to Castellan. "What do you want out of this? What's your goal?" "I don't know. I don't want her money if it comes with conditions. But I also don't want her to just get away with this, with treating Amara like garbage, with trying to manipulate me." "What about the foundation?" I asked. "Can we do anything to protect that?" Thessaly flipped through her notes. "The foundation is a separate legal entity. It has its own board, its own governance structure. Your mother-in-law is the board chair, but she's not the only board member. If you're on the board, you have standing to raise concerns about how the foundation is being managed." "I am on the board." "Then you have options. You could raise a formal complaint about conflicts of interest, about her using the foundation as a personal piggy bank or for reputation management, rather than genuine charitable work. You could rally other board members to your side. You could make staying on as chair very uncomfortable for her. That feels like using the foundation as a weapon. She's already using it as a weapon. She's using your care about the foundation's work to control you. I'm just suggesting you fight back using the same battlefield she chose. Castellan looked at me. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the part of him that had been raised to never air family business publicly warring with the part that was furious about what his mother had done. "We need to think about this," he said. "Of course, but don't think too long. You have less than a month before she changes her will. If you're going to act, you need to act decisively." We left Thessaly's office with our heads spinning. The idea that we could actually fight back, that we weren't just victims of Sophronia's machinations but had our own power, was both exhilarating and terrifying. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Amara? This is Marguerite Whitfield." I sat up straight. Marguerite was Castellan's aunt, his mother's younger sister. I had met her twice, briefly, at family events. She had seemed warmer than Sophronia, but that was a low bar to clear. "Hello, Marguerite. I heard about what happened at the estate, about what my sister did." My hand instinctively went to my cheek, which was still tender. News travels fast. "The housekeeper called me. She was horrified. I'm calling to apologize on behalf of the family." "You don't need to apologize for her actions. Someone needs to. And I need you to know that not everyone in this family shares Sophronia's views." I felt something loosen in my chest, a tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. "Thank you. That means more than you know. I also need you to know that I'm on the Trust Advisory Committee, the one that has to approve any changes to beneficiary status. And I will not approve cutting Castellan out of his inheritance because he married the woman he loves." Tears pricked my eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know you have an ally, because I'm ashamed of my sister and the way she's behaved, and because I've seen the way Castellan looks at you. That boy loves you desperately. Anyone who can inspire that kind of devotion is welcome in this family as far as I'm concerned. Your sister might cut you off too if you support us." Marguerite laughed, a warm sound so different from her sister's brittle tones. "Let her try. I have my own money, thank you very much. And unlike Sophronia, I actually care about family more than reputation." We talked for another 20 minutes. She told me about the family dynamics, about the long-standing tensions between her and her sister, about her own struggles being the younger, less favored daughter. She told me about other family members who were sympathetic but afraid to cross Sophronia. And she told me that she was ready to help in any way she could. When I told Castellan about the call, he actually smiled for the first time in days. Aunt Marguerite always was the rebellious one. My mother hates that she can't control her. She says she won't approve cutting you out of the inheritance. That's huge. If Marguerite votes no, my mother needs both of the other committee members to vote yes. And one of them is the corporate trustee who has a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of the trust, not Sophronia's personal prejudices. So maybe she was bluffing. Maybe. Or maybe she was counting on everyone being too intimidated to stand up to her. Over the next 2 weeks, we worked methodically. We documented everything. The ultimatum, the slap, every interaction we had ever had with Sophronia that demonstrated her prejudice and her attempts at manipulation. We reached out to other board members of the foundation, carefully, feeling out who might be sympathetic. We built relationships, shared our vision for what the foundation could be, planted seeds of doubt about Sophronia's leadership, and we prepared for the possibility that despite everything, we might still lose. We looked at our finances, at what our life would look like without any Whitfield money. It would be tighter, certainly. We would have to budget carefully, make sacrifices, but we would survive. We would build our life on our own terms. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Sophronia called a special meeting of the foundation board. The agenda was vague, just discussing the future direction of the foundation. But we knew what it was really about. This was her move, her attempt to consolidate power and push Castellan out. We arrived at the foundation office early. The conference room was on the 20th floor of a glass tower downtown, with views of the city spread out below. The other board members trickled in. Marguerite came in with a tight smile and sat next to us. The two family friends, older gentlemen who had known the Whitfields for decades, sat across from us with carefully neutral expressions. The representative from the corporate trustee sat at the end of the table with a stack of documents. Sophronia arrived exactly on time, dressed in a severe black suit, her silver hair pulled back in a style that looked like armor. She didn't acknowledge me at all, addressing her remarks to the room at large. Thank you all for coming on short notice. I've called this meeting to discuss some concerning developments regarding the Foundation's leadership and direction. I felt Castellan tense beside me. It has come to my attention, Sophronia continued, that some members of this board have been engaging in communications that undermine the cohesive operation of our organization. Private conversations with donors, questions about financial management, attempts to build coalitions around specific agenda items. She was looking directly at Castellan now. This behavior is inappropriate and suggests a fundamental lack of trust in the Foundation's leadership. Therefore, I am proposing that we restructure the board to ensure more unified oversight. Specifically, I'm recommending that we reduce the board size from 7 members to 5, eliminating positions that have become redundant or problematic. Which positions? Marguerite asked sweetly. I'm proposing we eliminate the junior board seat, which is currently held by my son, and the advisory seat, which you currently hold. The room went silent. She was trying to kick both of them off the board to eliminate any family members who might challenge her authority. The corporate trustee cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitfield, this is highly irregular. The board structure is defined in the Foundation's bylaws. We can't simply eliminate positions because they've become inconvenient. I'm not suggesting this is convenient. I'm suggesting it's necessary. The Foundation needs clear, decisive leadership, not constant second-guessing and political maneuvering. The Foundation needs accountability, Castellan said quietly. And transparency. 2 things that seem to make you very uncomfortable. Sophronia's eyes flashed. Careful, Castellan. Or what? You'll threaten to disinherit me again. You'll slap my wife in your foyer? Oh, wait, you already did that. The 2 family friends shifted uncomfortably. They clearly hadn't known about the physical assault. This is not the time or place for family drama, Sophronia said through gritted teeth. You made it the time and place when you used the Foundation as leverage to try to control my personal life. When you told me I had to choose between my wife and my inheritance. When you made it clear that my role in this family and in this Foundation was conditional on me abandoning the woman I love. One of the family friends, a man named Crawford, spoke up. Is this true, Sophronia? Did you threaten to disinherit Castellan? I expressed concern about his judgment, about choices that could impact the family's legacy. That's not an answer, Marguerite said. Did you or did you not give him an ultimatum, his wife or his money? Sophronia's silence was answer enough. Crawford leaned back in his chair, his expression troubled. That's deeply concerning. Using the inheritance as a tool of control, especially when it appears to be motivated by prejudice. I am not prejudiced, Sophronia snapped. Then why is his wife unacceptable when his previous girlfriend, who came from a similar wealthy white family, was perfectly fine? The other family friend, a woman named Delphine, nodded slowly. I've been wondering the same thing. I've met Amara. She seems lovely, accomplished, intelligent, clearly devoted to Castellan. The only difference I can see between her and Jennifer is race. There are many differences, Sophronia said coldly. Name them, Marguerite challenged. Sophronia's mouth opened and closed. For once, she seemed at a loss for words, because there was no way to explain her objections without revealing the racism at their core. Castellan leaned forward. I want to make a motion. I move that we conduct a comprehensive audit of the Foundation's finances and grant-making decisions for the past 5 years. I want to see where the money is really going. How much is being spent on actual charitable work versus administrative costs and social events? That's absurd, Sophronia sputtered. Is it? Because I've been looking at the publicly available tax filings, and they raise some questions. Like why we spent $40,000 on a gala last year, but only gave $20,000 to the housing project we're supposedly supporting. or why your travel expenses as board chair were over $100,000, or why we have 3 staff members whose job descriptions are mysteriously vague. The corporate trustee was making notes, his expression carefully neutral, but his interest clearly piqued. "I second the motion," Marguerite said. "As do I," said Crawford. Sophronia looked around the table, her composure finally cracking. "This is a coup. You're staging a coup because you don't like my personal opinions." "This is oversight," Delphine said, "which is what board members are supposed to do. If the finances are clean, an audit will prove it. If they're not, then we have a serious problem." "I've done nothing wrong." "Then you have nothing to fear from transparency," Castellan said. The vote was 5-1 in favor of the audit, with Sophronia casting the only dissenting vote. She sat there, rigid with fury, as the corporate trustee outlined the process, the timeline, the scope of what would be examined. When the meeting finally ended, Sophronia gathered her things with shaking hands. She looked at Castellan with something I had never seen in her eyes before. Hurt. Real, genuine hurt beneath the anger. "You've sided against me," she said quietly. "Your own mother." "You sided against me first," he replied. "When you made me choose between you and my wife. When you hit her. When you tried to use money as a weapon to control my life. I was trying to protect you." "From what? From love? From happiness? From building a life with someone who actually cares about me for who I am, not what I can inherit?" She looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time. "You've turned him against me." I met her gaze steadily. "I didn't have to turn him against you. You did that all by yourself. I just refused to disappear to make your life easier." She left without another word, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. We watched her go, and I felt Castellan's hand find mine under the table. "That was brutal," Marguerite said, but she was smiling. "And absolutely necessary. She's had unchecked power in this family for too long." Over the next month, the audit proceeded. What it revealed was damning. Sophronia hadn't been stealing exactly, but she had been using the foundation as her personal social fund. Extravagant galas, luxury travel, generous payments to organizations that served primarily to elevate her social status. The actual charitable work, the programs that helped real people, had been consistently underfunded in favor of activities that enhanced the Whitfield family's reputation. The board called another meeting to discuss the findings. This time, Sophronia arrived with a lawyer, but the evidence was undeniable. She had violated her fiduciary duty as board chair, prioritizing her personal interests over the foundation's mission. The vote to remove her as chair was unanimous, with even her remaining ally, Delphine, voting in favor after seeing the audit results. Castellan was voted in as the new chair, with Marguerite as vice chair. The first order of business was restructuring the foundation's priorities, shifting resources from galas and social climbing to actual community benefit. As for the inheritance, Sophronia did try to change her will, but Marguerite and the corporate trustee blocked it. Without a majority of the Trust Advisory Committee, she couldn't alter the succession plan. Castellan would still inherit, despite her best efforts to disinherit him. But something unexpected happened in the aftermath of these battles. Sophronia became ill. Nothing life-threatening, just a series of small health issues that added up to someone who was declining. And despite everything she had done, Castellan couldn't just abandon her. He visited her, awkwardly at first, sitting in her living room making stilted conversation. She never apologized. She never admitted she had been wrong. But slowly, gradually, the raw hatred in her eyes when she looked at him began to soften into something more complicated. Grief, maybe. Regret, possibly. I didn't go with him on these visits. That was a bridge too far for both of us. But after several months, something shifted. Castellan came home one evening looking thoughtful. "She asked about you," he said. "What did she ask?" "How you were, what you were working on, if you were happy." I sat down slowly. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you were fine, that you were leading a new initiative at work, that you were happy, that we were happy. And then I told her that if she ever wanted to meet you again, to actually know you, instead of just hating you, the door was open. But only if she could be respectful." "What did she say?" "She didn't say anything, but she didn't say no. It took another 6 months. 6 months of Castellan's patient visits, of slow thawing, of Marguerite working behind the scenes to help her sister see reason. And then one day I received a letter. It was written on heavy cream stationery, the kind that rich people use. The handwriting was elegant, careful. It said simply, "I would like to invite you to tea. This coming Saturday at 2 o'clock if you're available. Just the two of us. I think it's time we had a real conversation. Sophronia." I showed it to Castellan. He read it twice, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to go," he said. "Not after everything she's done." "I know, but maybe I should. Maybe this is the olive branch. Or maybe it's another trap. Maybe, but we'll never know if I don't go." That Saturday I drove to her estate again for the first time since the night of the slap. The snow had melted now. It was spring, and the grounds were beautiful, bursting with flowers and green growth. The housekeeper let me in with a warm smile, so different from the cold formality of my previous visits. Sophronia was waiting in a small sitting room I had never been in before, less formal than the main entertaining spaces. She was thinner than I remembered, frailer. Illness and stress had taken their toll, but her eyes were the same, sharp and assessing. She gestured to the seat across from her. I sat down, my spine straight, my hands folded in my lap. A maid brought tea, real china, not the disposable cups that would have been an insult. We were alone. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then Sophronia set down her teacup with a soft clink. "I owe you an apology," she said, the words clearly difficult. "For striking you, for the things I said, for trying to force my son to choose between his wife and his family." I waited. An apology was a start, but it wasn't enough. "I was wrong," she continued, "about you, about what you wanted, about what kind of person you are. I let my own prejudices and fears cloud my judgment." "What were you afraid of?" I asked quietly. She looked surprised by the question. "Of losing him, of the family legacy being diluted, of everything my family built being scattered and lost. The family legacy is just money. It's not sacred. To you, maybe, but to me, it represents generations of work, of sacrifice, of building something that would last. And you thought I would destroy it. I thought you would take from it. Everyone wants something from wealthy families. Everyone has an angle. I never wanted your money. I wanted your son. That's all I've ever wanted." She studied me, really looked at me, like she was seeing me for the first time. "I believe you. I didn't before, but I do now. You've had multiple opportunities to profit from this situation. You could have sued me for assault. You could have demanded a settlement to divorce him. You could have encouraged Castellan to fight dirty for the inheritance. You've done none of those things. Because that's not who I am. No, it's not." She picked up her tea again, her hands trembling slightly. "I've spent the last year watching the foundation transform under Castellan's leadership, watching actual good being done instead of just the performance of charity. It's forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about how I was running things, about what my priorities had become. People can change their priorities. Can they, at my age?" She smiled, but it was sad. "I've spent 62 years believing certain things, living a certain way. It's not easy to admit that perhaps I was wrong. No one's asking you to do a complete 180 overnight, but maybe you could start by seeing me as a person instead of a threat." "I'm trying." She set her cup down again. "That's why I asked you here. To try. To see if there's a way forward that doesn't involve this family being fractured forever." "What does that look like to you?" "I don't know. Perhaps occasional dinners. Perhaps meeting any grandchildren you might have. Perhaps learning to coexist, even if we're never close." It was such a small thing, coexistence. But given where we had started, it felt like a miracle. "I can agree to that," I said. "As long as you understand that I'm not going anywhere. I love your son. I'm going to be with him for the rest of our lives. And if we have children, they will be biracial. And they will be loved. And they will inherit their share of the Whitfield fortune. and there's nothing you can do to change any of that. She flinched slightly, but nodded. I understand. And you need to know that if you ever raise your hand to me again, or speak to me the way you did that night, there won't be another chance. Whatever relationship we build ends there, permanently. I understand that too. We finished our tea making careful small talk. She asked about my work. I asked about her health. It was stilted and awkward, but it was civil. When I left, she walked me to the door, something she had never done before. Thank you for coming, she said. I know it took courage. Thank you for inviting me. I drove home in a daze. When I told Castellan about the conversation, he pulled me into his arms and held me for a long time. I never thought she would apologize, he said into my hair. I never thought she would even try. People surprise you sometimes. Do you think it's real? Or is it just another manipulation? I think it's real. I think she's scared and sick, and realizing that her prejudices cost her something precious. Whether that translates into real change, I don't know. But I'm willing to give her the chance to try. You're a better person than I am. No, I'm just someone who knows what it's like to be judged for things I can't control. I'm giving her the grace I would want someone to give me. Over the months that followed, Sophronia and I built something that resembled a relationship. It was never warm, it was never easy, but it was real. She came to one of my work events, awkward and out of place among nonprofit workers and community organizers, but present. She asked questions about my family, genuinely trying to understand where I came from. She stopped making comments about my appearance or my speech or all the other microaggressions she had once deployed constantly. And when I got pregnant a year later, she cried. Real tears, not the performative kind. She held my hand and told me she was grateful for the chance to be a grandmother, that she would do better, that she wouldn't repeat her mistakes with the next generation. The baby, a girl we named Zora after the writer, was born on a cold November morning. She had her father's eyes and my skin tone, a beautiful blend of both of us. When Sophronia came to the hospital to meet her, I watched carefully for signs of disappointment or revulsion, but what I saw instead was wonder. She held Zora carefully, like the precious thing she was, and looked down at her tiny, perfect face with tears streaming down her cheeks. She's beautiful, she whispered. Absolutely beautiful. Yes, she is, I agreed. I'm sorry I almost missed this. I'm sorry I almost threw away the chance to know her. You didn't, though. You're here now. She looked up at me, this woman who had hated me, who had tried to destroy my marriage, who had hit me and threatened me and done everything in her power to drive me away. Thank you for letting me be here, for giving me another chance when I didn't deserve it. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were. Watching her with Zora, seeing the genuine love and regret and determination to do better, I felt something shift in my chest. The anger I had carried for so long, the hurt and resentment and fear, began to dissipate like morning fog. I would never forget what she had done. The scars, both visible and invisible, would always be there. But maybe, just maybe, we could build something new on top of the broken foundation of where we started. Castellan came into the room, back from filling out paperwork, and stopped short seeing his mother holding our daughter. For a moment, the 3 generations of Whitfields were frozen in a tableau. Then Sophronia smiled at him, a real smile, and he smiled back. She has your nose, Sophronia told him. Poor kid, he joked, and she actually laughed. It was a small moment, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it felt like a victory. Like all the fighting and suffering and refusing to back down had led to this, not perfection, not a fairy tale ending where everyone lived happily ever after, but something real and hard-won and precious. We had fought with every fiber of our being to stay together, to protect our love from people who wanted to destroy it for their own comfort. We had fought against racism and classism and family expectations and the weight of generational wealth. We had fought dirty when we had to and clean when we could. We had gathered evidence and built alliances and refused to be intimidated or bought off. And we had won. Not a complete victory, not without scars and losses along the way. But we had won the thing that mattered most, the right to love each other, to build a family together, to exist in our fullness without apology or compromise. As I watched my husband and his mother cooing over our daughter, as I felt the exhaustion and relief and fierce joy of new motherhood, I thought about all the people who would face similar battles, all the couples who loved across lines of race and class and family expectation, all the people who would be told to choose between love and security, between authenticity and approval, and I hoped our story might give them courage. Not because it was easy, but because it was possible. Because love, real love backed by fierce determination and strategic thinking and refusal to surrender, could overcome even the most entrenched opposition. The inheritance, the foundation, the family reconciliation, all of that mattered. But what mattered more was this: my husband's hand in mine, our daughter sleeping peacefully in her grandmother's arms, a future unfolding before us that we had fought for and earned and would protect with everything we had. We had been told to compromise or lose everything. Instead, we had fought for everything and compromised on nothing that mattered. And sitting there in that hospital room, surrounded by complicated love and hard-won peace, I knew that we had made the right choice. Every single time, we had chosen each other, and we always would. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.